There we go. Okay, once again, if you can't hear me for any reason, ask a question. There is a question box here. You can type in there, or if that doesn't work for some reason, just hit the chat box and send a note out, and I will try to pay attention to that. So here's a way to contact me. If you're stuck for some reason, you get logged off, this is the webinar ID today. Just go to join.gotowebinar.com, put in that ID, and that will bring you right back in. Here's a phone number and my email address, as well as our website. So let's start with some stories. So this is me, Paul Cronin, here on the left, and the distinguished looking gentleman on the right is my business partner, Jack Beauregard. So my story is I had a long career in retail wholesale manufacturing. I was part of a team that grew a business to about $90 million, and then we had an M&A transaction in 2001. I left from there and started my own data analytics company, my first one, and we were moving forward, building the business, building the software really, and looking to raise some capital. Unfortunately, in the fall of 2001, when we finally figured out what we wanted to do with our business and our software, we had the worst possible time to try to raise money. So we utterly failed. That was my big first professional failure, my big first transition that I had to deal with, which I sometimes wonder if I dealt with it all that well, knowing now what I know. Such is life. So from there, I started consulting. I went back to the industry, helped a few people launch another business, which I'm proud to say is succeeding nicely for them today, 12 years on. A little while later, I started working with a golf instruction company. I'm not a golf instructor. If you saw my swing, you'd understand why. And part of the process was I made an investment, and we were building year-round indoor golf training centers. Unfortunately, after I made this pretty significant investment, I realized that there were a lot of problems with the business that my golfers' eyes did not want to particularly see in advance. But we did right the ship, got things going, and about 4 years later, I decided to leave. The big impetus for deciding to leave is the CEO of the company, who owned a lot more of the business than I did, and I just didn't get along. In fact, we really hated each other. So an opportunity rose for me to sell at a very nice premium. I had about a 20% total return in about 4 years, which I was pretty happy about. So I got out and I got my money in June of 2008, which leads to my next story, which is called A Beach, a Beer, and a Phone Call. So I was sitting on my favorite beach in Cape Cod and having my favorite beer and watching the sunset, and the wire had just hit my bank account, and I was feeling really, really good. This is June of 2008. And then my phone buzzed, and I looked, and there was a voicemail, and I listened to it, and it was Greg, who was a friend of mine in the old business. Greg said, Paul, I'm just calling to congratulate you. I'm really happy for you. Obviously, we're very sad and to see you go, but I really just have one question. What are you going to do next? And I kind of looked down at the phone and I said, Greg, you son of a gun, you just killed my boss, which he did. But he asked really the right question, which is to understand thinking about my future as opposed to simply enjoying the sunset. I had a nice return, but certainly not enough to live financially independently the rest of my life. So as it so happened, I knew somebody who introduced me to a local organization called the Exit Planning Exchange. They're now slowly growing nationally. But at the exchange, I sat down next to this distinguished looking gentleman, Jack Beauregard, and Jack asked me a really important question. He said, Paul, what do you do? And I said, not having a particularly good answer, because I, at that moment, really didn't have too much going on other than a small consulting contract that was in the process of winding down. And he said, and I said, well, I help companies grow faster. I'm a sales and marketing guy. Is that something you're interested in? Jack said, well, maybe. And I said, well, Jack, what do you do? He said, well, you know how people get to a point in their life where they leave their business or they leave their career and they're not really sure what they're going to do next. And of course, at this moment, I'm sort of smiling inside and having a slightly out-of-body experience, saying, yes, I know exactly how that is. And he said, well, I have a process to help people go through it, very robust decision making, and they end up in a place where they feel good about where they're headed, do some planning around it, and they, don't really end to have any regrets. And I was thinking to myself, God, how does that work? How does someone go through a process like that? And what we ended up doing is deciding to meet for coffee. And we ended up having a first meeting, and then after that first meeting, we said, let's keep meeting. We went on to meet for just about a year, coffee for a year, as I like to say. And at the end of that process, we decided that we wanted to try to build a business, not so much around just consulting, but if there was a means to scale it. As it so happened, Jack was also a manufacturing background. So we eventually got that going, and what you see today, where we have people in several different countries around the world, and we're training people and we're educating people and doing public speaking, and that really has become successful transition planning. So say Jack has a somewhat interesting, somewhat similar story in the sense that he actually came from manufacturing and built a very successful business and left it. But he was in hips and knees, orthopedics, where I was in the retail world. His story is such that while he was going through this great success story, he was often finding that he wasn't getting fulfillment in his life, and he was wondering what was wrong. And one night, he sort of had this dream, like, Jack, you've got to change what you're doing here. Do something else with your life. Find your true purpose. And so he started researching, and one thing led to another, and he ended up at the Harvard Divinity School, going nights, working during the day, doing this. Living in the Boston area, he was able to do this and not have to get on a plane. So he's still growing his business, he's doing this research, he's doing a study, raising a family. And unfortunately, his wife gets very ill with cancer. It looks like she was going to beat it, but then it came roaring back, and she ended up dying. And he ended up having to figure out how to raise a very young child. And as part of that process, he looked at the company that he had built, and he essentially built a company that was completely dependent on him. And so he didn't really have a sellable business, which is a mistake many people make. And so as part of what we're trying to share today is you got a couple of people who had some interesting experiences and have come together and are really trying to share our experiences along with the experiences of the clients we work with and those who we collaborate with, and the stories that they share, that you've got to figure out what to do with your business, but you also have to figure out what to do with your life. And if you don't know what to do with your life, you'll often find excuses to not actually figure out what you should do with your business, whether it's transition or exit or whatever you might wish to call it. So moving forward. So what are some reasons that hold business owners back? Well, it's four of the big ones, or what we call the 4 A's. There's attachment, addiction, aversion, and avoidance. So what do we mean by attachment? Well, this is, I love my business. Why would I ever leave it? In fact, there was a quote from a gentleman who runs a pretty good-sized insurance agency around here, a life insurance agency. For many years, he had been part of the young entrepreneurs group, and then they moved forward. As he grew older and his cohorts grew older, they became something else. And many of his people, being in the Boston area, many of these CEOs he was working with, they have technology companies, and they would periodically ask him, so, hey, what's your exit strategy? And he would look at them and shake his head and said, I love my business. Why would I ever leave it? And what he was really saying is he was attached to all the elements of the business, and he couldn't imagine his life outside of it. How ironic. He's in the life insurance business. He can't imagine things might change. Another course is, the expression, I am what I do. If you were at a cocktail party and you walked up to somebody and you asked them, gee, what do you do? And the person happens to be an attorney, how are they going to respond? I'm a lawyer, or I'm an attorney. I'm a doctor. I'm a fill in the blank coach. And what that really means is they've mixed up their identity with what they do for a living. Of course, what does a doctor do? Well, he or she tries to heal other people, all right? If you're a teacher, you help people learn other things. If you're a an accountant. You know, you do books and you do taxes and you help people organize their finances. And it's extremely difficult for a lot of people, particularly professionals, particularly business owners, to separate out who I am from what I do. Those who can do that are much more likely to have successful transitions or exits, as the case may be. Another course is, as advisors, we're famously, talking to people on succession and saying, well, do you want the kids to take it over? I mean, you may be talking about your kids, maybe, who knows, in their 40s, 30s, and they've been at the business a long time, really capable of taking it over, but you're nervous. In fact, you're thinking that, well, gee, you're asking me to send my son take the business over, and I think of my son as this little boy in a cowboy hat, rather. Or I think of her as my little princess, and now she's going to run the business, but that's my retirement. How will that ever work? Others that may get advised to think about selling it to your employees or finding someone internally to take it over. And subconsciously they're even thinking, my employees, my God, they'll just steal from me. I'll never be able to get anything for my business. So these are attachments aversion. And of course, last is what I call the R&D method, which is repress and deny. I don't even want to think about it. Advisors in the room may be chuckling to themselves saying, how many times have I started to have a conversation with somebody and they found ways to ignore me or to just not pay attention or divert my attention? Owners in the room on the call may be thinking, how many times have I said that? And while we're on that matter, to get a greater sense of who is on the call today, we've got a small poll we're going to run. It's one question. I'm going to launch that right now, so you'd be kind enough to fill that in. It's really just trying to find out if you're a business owner, executive, or an advisor. So I'm just waiting for folks to answer that. And we'll give it another second there. Okay, great. So mostly advisors and executive and business owners here. Very good. Thank you so much. I'm going to close that and we'll get back. So what are some of the results of this aversion, avoidance, what have you? You can end up with impulsive decisions. So one impulsive decision could be somebody who you're talking to, a business owner, saying, I don't really have to worry about selling my business or planning for how I'm going to transfer my business. A buddy of mine, I've known him for many years in the industry, and he seemed to sell his business just fine. He got that, and he got 5x, whatever 5x means. But of course, the problem with that analogy is that each business is often quite unique. And so the circumstances of this buddy's is he may have had better systems than this owner did. He may have been in a hot geographic market and so on. There are multiple ways that somebody else's business has no relation to yours and therefore has no relation to your ability to successfully transfer it. And yet, people will often wait thinking this is no big deal. Or they'll point to a pile of letters that they get from various business brokers saying, I may have a buyer for your business, take my call. Many of those letters, as we all know, aren't particularly truthful. But it can be a means of getting an owner on the phone. Others, of course, very sadly, this is a story that was shared with me by an advisor who make a promise. In this case, this business owner made a promise to his wife. If she ever got seriously ill, he would take care of her. He wouldn't just shove her off into some home simply because his business was such a big part of his life. And so she did get sick. And when that happened, the only thing that he could think to do, because he had done no planning, was to shut his company down. He liquidated it. And employees got fired, vendors got stiffed, on and down the line. He made he sort of honored his promise, but he didn't do any planning around that if that should occur. And the likelihood is one of two people may get sick, all right? probably will get sick in the course of a long marriage. Of course, then you've got the bad year scenario. So it was a gentleman I know, is a friend of mine. He was in a manufacturing type of business, and there was another gentleman with a similar business who had a couple of bad years. And next thing you know, this guy turned 70. So between a couple of bad years and a couple of health issues, and now he's 70, and he's like, that's it, I'm out. And my partner, my friend, was actually going to be joining us on a golf trip, and he ended up canceling at the last minute because he had to close the sale of this business. Otherwise, it actually would have messed his business up quite a bit. And so simply a combination of bad year, bad things, not doing any planning, and you make an impulsive decision that it's time to get out. And this guy ended up getting pennies on the dollar. It was great for my friend as the buyer, but not so great for the seller. Sometimes you may be thinking, or perhaps you've had friends of yours or clients of yours saying, when you ask the question about, when are you going to leave? Say, oh, I'm not worried about, when I leave because, my daughter, she's got some grandchildren and, she's out down in Texas or what have you. And when I leave, we're just going to move down there and, we're going to help her out. Because, our grandkids, they just love us. Our daughter loves it every time we come visit. Well, that's great. All right. But of course, what you may forget is your grandma, the rock star, or grandpa, the rock star, when you come to visit. As another contact told me recently, he said, when you're around all the time, grandpa's not a rock star anymore. You may also learn that the grandkids grow up a lot faster than you anticipate. And so you're just not as needed as much. And and one last thing, that daughter that you think needs your help, she may be a profoundly competent person. Her husband, or conversely the son, may be profoundly competent in raising their children. And while they might like a little help, they certainly don't need you around all that much. And so this is what I call the junk food of decision making, which are these impulsive decisions that really don't have any full planning behind it, no robust decision making behind it, and can often lead to very bad outcomes. So I want to share a story of a gentleman who had been an accountant for many years, 35 years he's been doing taxes, as he liked to say. And he was trained in an exit planning process for one of the large organizations out there and was actually coaching some of his clients on how to leave their companies. But he had never quite gotten around to doing something for his practice. And then he had a heart attack. And he realized, fortunately, he survived. That was the good news. The bad news is he hadn't done any planning for himself. And he realized that's enough. So he attended one of our workshops, got some ideas, got some private coaching, was able to put a plan together for how to migrate his practice, to bring in a partner, a younger person to train up, and then gradually start focusing on other parts of his life with this plan he had put in place, so that he can create a sense of purpose and meaning in his life beyond the next tax season. And I happened to run into him at a networking event a while ago. And I said, gee, George, how are you doing? He goes, oh, I'm doing great. He says, 6 months ago, before I started all this, I would come to these events and everyone would want to talk is, okay, George, what's going on here? What's going on there? Now that I've got this younger person coming in and she's out and doing some networking, and I come up and I see people and they'll say, oh, how's your partner doing? What's going on with her? What's going on with the business? So already people are envisioning me leaving the scene so that I can focus on other things that are more important in my life. So Susan was a different story. She's actually a professional coach, and so she did not have a traditional business to sell. She had, if you will, some clients that she thought might be able to continue to grow over many years and coach as a CEO coaching practice. She's actually a psychologist by training, and she had moved here from California, and she was able to build this business, but now she's at a place where both physically, intellectually, it was time to do something else, but she was sort of stuck. She couldn't imagine, how would I get out? I don't know what to do with this. How do I create an income stream for this? She again attended one of our workshops, worked through some key areas, and then followed that with some private coaching. And what she realized is, if she made this great transition from one career to the next, and going from one part of the coast of the country to the other coast of the country, she certainly can figure out what to do with her business to create an income stream that will help support her going forward, and to transition it so that her clients are going to be getting the service that they need as well. And ultimately, that's the path she's on, where she's working on a more fulfilling and purposeful future. Sorry about that. Before I forget, I just want to pause that there will be an informational webinar for advisors. That's Tuesday the 8th, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's going to talk about some of the deeper explanation of some of the coaching programs that we offer to people. Also to help advisors learn to use some of these programs to generate leads and new clients, and then general structure and pricing of the training as well. And this is all webinar based. So going back now, financial risk is a key issue that every business owner faces, but there's some particular ones for those who are the late career business owners. Very often, between 80 and 90% of their net worth is tied up in the business, in illiquid asset, and it's very difficult to find a way to get out of it. There was a study done several years ago in Australia, and it's since been replicated in Canada and the UK and also the US. And very consistently, what we see is about 78% of business owners have made no plans for how they're going to transition their companies, or how they would quote unquote retire. Even worse, 60% have had no discussions about their plans. So think about that for a minute. 80% of the net worth tied up in an illiquid asset. Most of them have no formal written plans about what they're going to do, not the junk food decision making that we talked about earlier, okay, but real written plans, robust decision making. And even worse, most of them aren't even talking about it. Many of these folks are just like this guy, someone on a wire waiting for a bad thing to happen. There's also personal risk when you're not thinking about it, when you're not doing the planning. So Velcro husband is a little expression that we came up with. And what that means is when the CEO of the company sort of comes home and he runs crashing into the CEO of the house, particularly for the baby boomer generation, and I'm part of that generation. Many of the business owners, if not most of them, are men. And so therefore, the business has been their sphere of influence, and many of their wives, the house was their sphere. So now you've got a guy who's used to having an organized day, has a lot of structure, and suddenly he's home. And so he gets up in the morning and is asking, okay, so what's for breakfast? And after breakfast, what does he ask next? What's for lunch? And after lunch, what does he ask next? So what's for dinner? And when his wife, who most likely has a schedule, which is how she's lived her life, perhaps she's working sometime, part-time, full-time, and he doesn't have a structure, so the easiest thing for him to do is ask her, where are you going? What do you need? Do you need me to do stuff? In other words, he's kind of all over her. Another expression I like to share is a story of Tip O'Neill, who's a famous politician, congressman from Massachusetts. And he spent, I think, about 40 years in Congress, retired and comes home, and his wife has a conversation with him and said, I married you for better or for worse. And in the 40 years you've been in Congress, I haven't once made you lunch. So just want to let you know, we're not adding lunch to the marriage vows. You need to get out of here every day. And he ended up getting a little office to keep himself going. Sadly, addiction and dependency problems are on the rise for many generations in our country, but in particular the boomers, because they're getting to a point where many of the things that they wanted to accomplish in life, they've accomplished. And if they're not getting a sense of fulfillment, if they've left their business or they've retired, they can very easily fall into these patterns, sometimes for health, sometimes for mental health, and so forth. Now, MLS does not stand for multiple listing service. What it means is married living separately. Very often, particularly this generation, men will retire before their wives. And it could be, a wife could be working 2, 3, 5 years, continuing to work because he or she wants to still enjoy it, too young, haven't saved enough for retirement, etc. And what you may end up with is they may have, purchased a quote retirement home in one state, but wife may be, back in a major market earning the money there. So if you get somebody up north and the other one down south, you're married, but you're living separately. And sadly, that can lead to a lot of problems. And in some cases, you really do need to hire the multiple listing service with a real estate agent to separate and divorce. I'll talk a little bit more about gray divorce on the next slide, but it is gray has referred to the color of one's hair. And most sadly, suicide is on the rise, or all generations, in particular now, for men in their 70s, it's, I believe, one of the top 5, or certainly in the top 10 causes of death, which is really tragic. So this is a study done at Bowling Green State University and in 2009, and this was looking at divorce rates of various generations. And the 50-plus crowd has doubled in 20 years. So as you can see there, 10% of all divorces in 1990 were 50-plus crowd, and that rose to 25%. And there are projections that could run to somewhere between 30 and 40% of all divorces. So there's kind of this tidal wave potentially of divorce on the wane. And I can speak from a professional networking group I just left this morning, and the divorce attorney was spending the first 10 minutes of the meeting thanking various other advisors who had referred business to her, and virtually all of them were clients who were in the 50-plus crowd. Oh, and by the way, in the United States, 2/3 of all divorces are initiated by women. So for guys who think everything's all set, you might want to check in. So what is the golden years? Golden years is an expression that was created, actually was a marketing term created by Del Webb in order to do the Sun City real estate development. But what it really was defined as, retirement was equal to leisure and recreation. You work really hard, you may not live that long once you have some good years sort of, before you go. Life in the rocking chair, golf, walks on the beach, all of that sounds wonderful. In fact, many things are. But if you do that day after day after day, as someone told me, is, when you're retired, every day is Sunday afternoon. And that kind of ruins what Sunday afternoon is supposed to be all about. So if that's what you think of the golden years, and that sounds really boring to you, it would be very easy for a business owner to say, well, the heck with it. I'll just keep working. Perhaps you've said this to yourself, the best that I can do with the rest of my life, well, I'll just die at my desk. And then, of course, you could end up like this guy. What a great looking tie. I sure hope you're not thinking to yourself that this is it. I can't think of anything better to do. I'll just die at my desk. I'll go out boots first. Perhaps this is what your clients are thinking. Either way, it's really not the best way to live one's life. And in fact, it's kind of a myth too. You see, how we die in the United States is we die in hospitals, nursing homes, hospices. Sometimes we die in ambulances. In other words, we leave this earth the way we came into it, through the medical industrial complex. And even worse, and this was a true story shared to me by an advisor, there's a gentleman who had his own business, got up early each morning and worked at his home office. He was no longer married, started that routine one day, and there was no one really to check on him because he worked essentially by himself. A couple of days later, his daughter, who had been trying to reach him and hadn't heard from him, goes to the house, goes to his little office, and finds him dead at his desk. So even if that's what you wanted, why would you want to put anyone else, someone that you love and care and respect for, to sort of find you that way? There has to be a better way. And we believe it's a new way of living. In the late 20th century, this whole concept of retirement came about. You somewhere in your 60s. We all start with an education, and sometime in our late teens, early 20s, we launch a career. Several careers, as the case may be. But somewhere in your 60s, the idea was you were going to retire and go to the golden years. But something changed along the way. modern medicine came along and has extended life dramatically. My mom just passed away recently, 89.9 years. She was 6 weeks away from making 90. And yet I know the last 10 years of her life probably would not have existed 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but for modern medicine. Right? And here's a stat I looked today at the Centers for Disease Control. If you're a 65-year-old male in the United States, you have 18 more years statistically of living. If you're a 65-year-old female, you have 20 years of living. And the question is, what kind of living are you going to do? Is it going to be exciting? Is it going to be fulfilling? You're going to follow the golden years, sort of boring and quiet? And what we're suggesting is this new time of life in your 60s, 70s, and beyond, which can last 20, 30 years in some cases, how do you make the most of that? How do you be the best that you can be? How can you make this period of life not a period of withdrawal, retirement, but a period that's exciting and dynamic, and it's something you have consciously planned? So why do owners fail to plan a transition? So here are some reasons that we've learned in our practice, what we've learned from other advisors who work with lots of different business owners. Many are simply afraid to think about leaving. Many think it's just too early to plan. There'll always be time 5 years from now. In fact, I gave a talk recently, and there was a woman there who I was guessing was probably in her late 60s. And I put this slide up, and she said, well, I'm just here to learn because I don't plan on leaving my business for another 5 years. And I kind of laughed and said, well, I understand that. But, wouldn't it make sense to start thinking now? Because anything could happen between now and then. So despite everything I was saying about anything can happen, she still wasn't connecting the dots. So others, there's a fear that the process will be too complicated. And to a certain degree, it can be. It can take between 3 and 5 years to successfully position a company to, have the right people in place so that you can have a successful transition that leaves you with an income or amount of assets to fund your future. Many, of course, are afraid of unknown future. When you go to the office every day and you have this expectation, and here are these, 4 walls that you live in, you kind of are in control of your own domain if you're a business owner in many cases. Now you take yourself out of that office, you are quite literally a fish out of water. Well, that's an unknown future, or if you will, falling into a black hole. And if you don't know what you're going to do, why would you jump into a black hole? And lastly, and this is much the same case of the fault of the advisors, is many business owners just don't know experienced advisors who can help them plan and implement a successful transition. So hopefully today, some of you who are advisors are listening to this and take some of the kernels of nuggets of wisdom I'm sharing, and really take this information out into the world. I encourage every advisor, do more, have more conversations, have more public discussion, put more information out there for free, because there are a lot of business owners that would be happy to soak up this information if they know it existed. What are some lessons we can learn? Well, one lesson is an owner who doesn't take the time to analyze and compare their options may not make the best decision about what to do with the company and may not get the best value for it. And there's pretty significant research around this that most business owners, perhaps as many as 60 to 70%, within about 6 months after they leave, have a lot of regrets. And part of it is around they think they may have left some money on the table. But if you dig a little further, it's like, if I had known I was going to leave 5 years from previous to when I actually did, I could have done things in the company to have a better financial outcome for the company and, most importantly, for me. Another lesson, if you don't have a well thought out plan for what you're going to do after you leave, your life can become boring, unfulfilling, and meaningless. That's sort of the every day is Sunday afternoon. You ask someone what day it is, and they don't know what day it is anymore because yesterday is just like today, and tomorrow is just going to be like yesterday. So, lesson 3, getting cold feet during the transition process can harm your reputation later. So this is a story shared by me, a gentleman in Canada who was consulting with a business owner, very successful company. He had everything lined up. The buyer was ready to take everything over and move on. And because he didn't take the time to really plan for what he was going to do next, he needed to create a situation where only he could solve. And so he actually fired his largest supplier. Of course, completely blew the deal out of the water. And everyone was completely upset with him, family, etc. But he knew that if he did that, in essence, sabotage the process, only he could put the Humpty Dumpty back together again. Well, he did, but it's 5 years later, as this advisor was telling me, and the owner still hasn't left the business, and it's dramatically less valuable than it was at the time he decided to have this foolish response. And it was all stemmed from an unwillingness to really think thoughtfully and plan thoughtfully for his future. And lesson 4 is, if you have unrecognized emotions and fears, you can sabotage your attempts to leave the business. You may leave the business financially successfully, but personally have bad repercussions, and you may end up making some poor decisions or impulsive decisions. So what is required to change this? It really requires a new way of thinking. So many people have seen this exercise that, is the glass half full, is the glass half empty? I was giving a talk, maybe 2 years ago now, and I put this slide up and I said, here's the classic example. And someone barked out, "Oh, the glass is overflowing. There are endless opportunities." And I looked at him and said, "How could you look at that and say it's overflowing?" All right. Now, he's some sort of a coach and he was trying to get everybody excited. I don't know, maybe he was trying to pitch for business. But the truth is, this glass is neither half full nor half empty. In fact, it's both. All right. So it isn't a matter of having an optimistic mindset or a pessimistic mindset, but a balance. This glass is perfectly balanced. It's half full of air and half full of wine. And that balance, the ability to accept different elements of your life, positive elements and negative elements, understanding that good things are going to happen and bad things are going to happen. And that's the way the world works. All right. Positive and negative. All right. Go back to basic math. And this new way of thinking is what people need to embrace to enter a new stage of life and have a sense of fulfillment. So, of course, there are other folks talking about this. We're not the only ones. Lee Iacocca, who's a retired CEO of Chrysler. He left Chrysler sort of on top of the world, and all of a sudden he's like, my goodness, who am I now? As you can read. What a lot of people don't know about Iacocca is he had another transition earlier in his career. He was actually at Ford for most of his career and was responsible for launching the Mustang, which is one of the most successful automobile launches in the history of American autos. He launches this, and he's looking forward to some great reward. Well, there was a change at the head in the Ford family, and apparently the new Ford came in and didn't care for him very much and fired him. Iacocca was floored, saying, I introduced the Mustang. Look how great our business is. Why would you fire me? And the story is that Ford turned to him and says, I'm firing you because I just don't like you. Ooh, what a kick to the gut. So you never know when things can happen. And the key is to make sure that you haven't completely tied yourself up psychologically with where you are or what your title is, because that can be ripped away from you. All right. Another example is, 5 years ago, if you owned a fleet of taxis in Boston or New York, you were set for life. Who would want to own a fleet of taxis today when you're competing with Uber and it's completely decimating your business model? Who knows what other businesses out there that somebody's running today thinking they're in great shape, and there's some brainiac at MIT or some hotshots out in Silicon Valley and they're about to blow that business model up too. So you have to start separating yourself. You have to start looking at your business objectively, what its value is. And you really need to think about if, rather than trying to get that last 5%, maybe what you have, this is the right time to sell it. This is the right time to do the transition plan, sooner rather than later. In terms of other retirement planning from Business Week magazine, this is a great quote. And then one of my favorite from Peter Drucker, who's sort of one of the founding fathers of the science of management, is, there is one prerequisite to managing the second half of your life. You must begin working on it long before you enter it. So if you were to ask me at a cocktail party and I was wanted to be funny and say, gee, Paul, what do you do? I say, well, I'm in the peace of mind business. And what we're saying is if you're doing a proper succession planning, transition planning, wherever you call yourself a business owner, executive, or advisor, these are 5 elements that you should have a sense of. You should have a sense of freedom. You have a sense of structure in your life that you can move forward through from day to day, month to month, year to year. You should have a real sense of happiness that you've made the right choices, that you're feeling good about yourself and your life, and perhaps the business or career you left behind. You should have a sense of fulfillment that what you do, the people you interact with, are the people you want to be with, and you're doing kind of things that make sense to you. And ultimately, you ought to be on a path towards significance, or this greater connection to the universe of which we're all part. So this is a succession strategy. We call it a holistic succession strategy. Some people call it an integrated succession. And this is something that every business owner, I hope, really takes to heart, and advisors really take to heart. This is our little logo here in the middle. COMP stands for clarity, opportunity, meaning, and purpose. And really, our process is about business owners and others, boomers in general, really getting clarity in their mind of what kind of future they want to move towards, developing opportunities around that will lead them towards that future, and make sure that whatever activities that they're involved with and the people they're connecting to, they're generating those activities, and the people they're connecting to are really generating a sense of meaning and purpose in their life. So the reason we broke it up this way is to try to simplify it. Most business owners have holes in their business, things they need to improve, whether it's sales, operations, finance, manufacturing, etc. And they've got to fill those holes to help optimize value so they can create either an income stream or an asset base that will serve them and fund this next chapter of their life, whether it's 10, 20, or 30 years. They need to make the process matter, which is ultimately what we do, and whether it's a business psychologist or folks like us who are advisors and consultants from a variety of walks of life who follow our process. But the idea is if it matters to the business owner, all right, if you're the business owner and it matters to you that getting this right is important, then you will continue through all the hard, long slog that's required to have your strategy implemented properly. You also need to make it last, and it, of course, being whatever this income stream you are going to generate or the asset base you're going to generate an income from there, because you got to make that last a long time, 10, 20, 30 years. That's what the numbers say. And ultimately, of course, you need to make it happen. You need to make sure that you carry the ball all the way into the end zone, despite what happens, despite how many times you get knocked down or hit. If you're an advisor, you need to really think about where you fit. Are you someone who can help business owners make their business better, stronger, more profitable, more transferable, sustainable? Then work on that. You've got to also help them. Maybe part of you understands that, well, I'm somebody who's going to make it happen. I'm a business broker. Well, if that's what you do, you're sort of at the end game, if you will. Who are you going to collaborate with, all right, to make sure the business owner gets what they want? Collaborate with the people that make the process matter, folks like us. Collaborate with financial advisors to make it last a long time. And if people sort of get out of their silos, I'm a financial advisor, that's all I focus on. I'm an attorney, all I just look around is the documents. I'm not saying you do, but if that's what you do, then you're really missing the entire strategy. And if you're a business owner and you're talking to people, your advisors individually, and you're bringing them together in some fashion, or perhaps hire someone who can bring them together in some fashion, then you don't really have a strategy. You get a bunch of moving parts. And it's a cohesive, holistic strategy that's going to bring you the best overall outcome, personally, financially, and professionally. So What I really do is provide a framework for purposeful living. Right? Provide a framework for people in this age bracket, 50 plus, and all the people we've trained in different parts of the world. And they follow the same basic process, and you end up here. And why it's important to have purposeful living is multiple studies have shown over many years that people who live with a sense of purpose through their lives live longer, healthier lives. So if some of this is like woo-woo, meaning, purpose, what have you, I don't understand that, I sure hope you get living a longer, healthier life. What are some core elements that you need to work on? Well, these are aspects of one life that you really need to think through, particularly if you're moving away from owning a business or working full-time. You got to keep yourself physically healthy, okay? Whether it's walking or jogging or marathons or whatever, you got to work on things on your body to extend it, all right? You need to stimulate your mind, all right? And I'm sorry, this doesn't mean crossword puzzles and Sudoku, right? That's just not going to cut it. You know, maybe it's college courses, maybe it's learning a new language, maybe it's something else. But you get that your brain engaged on a regular basis, much the same way, you know, your career, your business has done. You need recreational creative activities. Maybe it's art, maybe it's golf, maybe it's sailing, maybe it's something else that gets once again, your body and your mind working differently, all right, interactively. If you have a spouse or partner, remember that slide about great divorce, married living separately, all right? You have a spouse or partner, it's really important that you're in tune with what's important to them, doing something on a regular basis to maintain that connection. If you don't, you certainly, and that's something that is of interest to you, you need to understand what your values are. And when you know what's important to you and what your values are, you can then look to connect with people who have shared values and then perhaps build a life with that person. Or perhaps a group of people, if you're not interested in an individual person, that you have these regular activities with based on a real strong common set of values. Most of us, of course, have families, and it's important to maintain some regular activity or activities with family to maintain those connections because let's face it, as we get older, it'd be nice to have younger people to help you out because sometimes you just can't get to everything. It's certainly happened with my siblings taking care of my elderly mother over the years. You've got to figure out where you're going to live. You know, are you in the right size house, the right kind of house, the right part of the country, right part of the world? You have to think through what's important. So most of us create social connections at work, right? When you leave work, despite Facebook and Twitter and all the other social media platforms out there, the truth is you're going to lose a substantial amount of the people you have your social connection. You've got to find a way to replace that. And whether you're a lawyer on the call today or you're a business owner, it really doesn't matter. We face that same dilemma. This can be a period of time of life where you can express your spirituality or faith, or perhaps explore that more deeply. And we don't preach any particular faith tradition or any faith tradition at all. But, you know, we are human beings, a part of this thing called the universe. And if you've got the time, why not think about it now? Why not work through it and hopefully get a greater sense of, you know, your importance to the world, your connections to this greater thing we call universe. And of course, then there's work. There's income-producing work and volunteer philanthropic work. Right? Now, we have chosen this term, income-producing work, very purposefully. And the reason we say that is it may be a business, it may be consulting, it may be part-time work, it may be contracting, whatever you're doing now. It may be all of those things. And it may be 10 hours a week or maybe 10 hours a month. You'll have to decide, but we believe most people, except of course, you know, for the Bill Gates of the world, having some income producing work will sustain your retirement, if you want to call it that, or this platinum years experience. You know, the financial advisors can very easily do the calculation. You know, $1 of income in your retirement years, your 60s, 70s, and beyond, is one less dollar you're drawing from your retirement funds. Now, in terms of volunteerism can actually drive many of these things. You're not sure what you might do for income-producing work? Well, if you can research what kind of volunteer organizations you want to be part of, you may learn from there that there are income-producing connections to what you're doing. All right. At the very least, volunteering can give you new social connections. It could perhaps keep you physically healthy if you're, banging nails for Habitat for Humanity. All right. And it can also really get your creative juices going. But this holistic approach, and this is a circle for a reason, all of these are interconnected. And the tiny little dot at the very, very middle, that's you. That's who you really are, your authentic self. And finding out who your authentic self, that creates your sense of meaning and significance. And all of these activities, that is your purpose. That's how you're connecting to the rest of the world. So here are some free offers. If you're interested, you go to our website, platinumyears.com, right on the home page. There's a How Ready Are You? It's a downloadable assessment. It's a PDF. And it's kind of a fun thing to do. It takes you 20, 30 minutes or so to go through and gives you a little bit of a feel for how prepared you are to make a major transition. If you're a business owner or you deal with business owners, you might want to take a look at this guide. It's a what's next for your future. Those are simple downloads, and I hope you take advantage of them on our website. In terms of all our coaching, we have a variety of coaching programs, workshops. We even have programs that you can do yourself. In the chat box, I think I mentioned earlier, for advisors, there's a webinar we talked about, but also for boomers, there's you can click a link there and you'll see things about our various programs, including our self-directed programs. But all of our coaching programs have some combination of the following, where there's some online questionnaires, there's books or white papers, and then some form of guidebook or workbook that you're either doing on your own if you're doing a program of self-reflection, or you're doing with a trained professional who's gone through our training program. We have a transition advisor program as well as transition planning consultant. The transition planning consultant is those are people who are really our gurus. They paid us a lot of money and gone through many, many hours of training, 2,000 pages of training materials. The transition advisors work very specifically on these coaching programs that are really geared towards helping a business owner or that executive or professional really get started, really get engaged. Like, I've got to get serious about what I want to do now. Am I going to leave my career? Am I going to leave my business? And since I am going to do that at some point, what would the planning process look like for me? So this is an opportunity for advisors to get their clients engaged in a process. Even if they're not going to do the personal planning, they sort of hand people back to us or some of the people we've trained. That's great. Getting somebody engaged and in a planning process will allow any advisor to help their client in whatever they already do, whether it's accounting or finance or legal work, what have you. And our process with advisors is we teach you how to use it, have you experience it, walk you through some ways to marketing, and then we always offer a money-back guarantee on virtually everything we do. So once again, this is the informational webinar for advisors next Tuesday at 2 p.m. And here's what you'll be going over. My business partner, Jack Beauregard, will be going through all that. In terms of boomers, then a great place to go is the Platinum Years. Business owners or executives on the call today. Programs, self-directed. These are things you can do right now. There's lots of stuff under free resources, free guides, podcasts, downloads. Please do the research there. It costs you nothing just to click and read or listen. And as we're starting to get towards the end here, I really want to hopefully have an image that will stick in your mind, and that's what I call the 3 paths forward. As we said earlier, most people look at this point of life and they think they really have 2 choices. They can either sort of go to traditional retirement, which is this sort of nice, smooth road, the golden years, or if that looks really boring to them, think, well, I'll just sort of follow the rutted road to dying at my desk, whatever, and see what happens. And what we're really encouraging people, in fact, what we're challenging people is to take this middle path. You can't quite see where it's going, but it could be a brighter, exciting future. It could, in fact, be the best 10, 20, or 30 years of life, which is we call the path to the Platinum Years. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. I'm happy to take some questions. Let's see, I didn't see any questions pop up here. But if you wanted to put some questions in now, or if you just want to put that in the chat box, feel free to go ahead and do that. While people are sort of thinking about that, I'll Okay, we got one question here. Let's see. Hello. Oh, I don't know what happened. I zapped. I apologize. Fritz, I'm sorry I'm not sure what I did there. Maybe you could raise your hand again. Okay. Trying to get the question here. We go. We're having a problem with questions. I apologize. Fritz, I'm not sure why this is not working. All right, I'm going to unmic you. Fritz, ask your question if you can hear me. Can you hear me, Fritz? Nope. All right, apologies. Not sure what's happening. I'll go through a couple of questions that I often get. One is, how long do the coaching programs last? Well, the short coaching programs, the What's Next program, that's really 2 or 3 sessions, and sessions typically are an hour to hour and a half. There's an online questionnaire that takes about 20 minutes or so. And for the business owners, there's a great book called Finding a New Owner, which you can download chapter 1 on our site, so you can read that in a weekend. It really talks about our philosophy, but also goes into some of the practical elements of what's involved in a major succession. There's a similar program for executives and professionals called Explore. Instead of a book, there's a white paper built around there. Other questions that we get are in terms of pricing. So if we're delivering programs, we being my partner I, shorter coaching programs are generally $500 to $700. Longer programs could often run $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, depends on how long they are. All advisors who go through our training create their own pricing, which is why you don't see pricing on our website, other than for things like books or the online programs, self-directed programs, which are pretty inexpensive. And in terms of our training programs, the Transition Advisor program, that's $895. It's 4 sessions, doesn't take an awful lot of time. But if you're interested in being a guru, transition planning consultant, that's a bigger investment. It's about 30 hours of training, and that's actually a $10,000 investment. So we try to cover everything from inexpensive to in the middle to more elaborate, whether you're looking for help for yourself or you're looking for training. Any other questions? Hopefully the question box is starting to, nope. All right. So looks like we're going to wrap it up there. Once again, in the chat box, I've highlighted there. You can click and look at the next steps. The register for the next webinar is the 8th. And then if you're a boomer, business owner, executive, and just are looking for more information, please go to theplatinumyears.com. Well, thank you very much. If you needed or think of a question later and want to send it to me, just send it to Paul at, in fact, I'll just type it in, Paul at theplatinumyears.com. Hopefully I spelled that right. And I'll be happy to try to answer it or direct you to a place on our website that can help you. So thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed everyone tuning in. I enjoyed doing this today. Have a great day. Hope to see you again soon.